Hey everybody. Well, it is very early in the morning. I've been up since like 4. I don't know why. It sucks, but oh well. I'm joined this morning by Kane, my chocolate lab. So if there's any weird snorting noises, that's him. Right, I just wanted to, I wasn't planning on doing this, but I've been thinking about it since kind of yesterday. Yesterday was the Women's March against Trump. Trump just got voted in, and there was a big, huge Women's March. I think it was for equality and for, comments Trump had made and, standing up for women's rights and all this stuff. And I don't know, sometimes I just really roll my eyes about stuff like that. But I'm really passionate about subjects like that, not about women's rights, but about where a believer should stand on things like this. And it's not like I have an issue with people who, have an opinion on women's rights or men's rights or whatever. Even the likes of abortion or things that pertaining to the church and the world and the government and what's happening. And, it's great, have an opinion, we should have an opinion and we should be fully convinced in what we believe. But I think I get kind of when believers, disciples of Jesus, feel that they need to really get loud and voice their opinion and voice their beliefs on things like politics and women's issues and all this stuff. I just think sometimes, like a lot of times, it's a waste of kingdom time. And I just want to read a couple verses. The first one is out of Luke chapter 2, verse 49, kind of 48 and 49. This is when Jesus was a boy, a young boy, and his parents would have traveled to Jerusalem every year for the Passover. And Jesus would have gone with them. They would have gone in a big caravan, so a whole bunch of families and friends would have all gone together, because I think at this point they were living in Nazareth or Galilee. And so anyway, this is verse 48. And when Joseph and Mary, saw him, they were amazed. And his mother said to him, "Child, why have you treated us like this?" Jesus. Okay, so they'd had the Passover. Mary and Joseph were leaving, going back to Galilee, assuming Jesus was somewhere in the caravan playing with kids or whatever. But he wasn't. He wasn't there. And they only realized a couple days into their journey back that he wasn't there. So they had to go back to Jerusalem to try and find him, freaking out as parents would. They were, "Here your father and I have been anxiously looking for you, distressed and tormented." And he said to them, "How is it that you had to look for me? Did you not see and know that it is necessary, as a duty, for me to be in my Father's house and occupied about my Father's business?" So that's the first one. And then the second one was just about Jesus. He'd healed somebody, and the Jews were freaking out on him, mostly the religious Jews, because he had done it on the Sabbath. For this reason, this is John 5, verse 16. "For this reason the Jews began to persecute Jesus continually, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, 'My Father has been working until now. He has never ceased working, and I too am working.'" And, when I look at the things that are happening, even in the government in Northern Ireland, where I'm living right now, in the politics, because we have no government anymore. It kind of collapsed a couple weeks ago. And everybody's, this DUP, this Sinn Féin, this, and all, and then this women's rights thing and this march and all this, and I'm thinking, okay, fair enough for the world to do this. People who aren't Christians, the world is their world, literally, quite literally. What goes on around them in the world, in their government, that's all they have. That's their world. So it doesn't surprise me that people would get really uptight and opinionated and really loud and, and getting passionate about things like this, But when I see believers, really, as we say over here, giving it stacks, And, posting things on Facebook about, this government said this and this happened and that happened, and, women's rights and we ought to have equal rights. It kind of makes me go, as I think, okay, it's not that I have an issue that you have an opinion, but, why do we waste so much time, not just having an opinion, but, really voicing that opinion and standing up and protesting things. And, when Jesus was actually quite clear, he said, my Father has been working until now, and I too am working. And even as a boy, he said, I am busy about my Father's business. And what's his Father's business? The kingdom. His kingdom. And if we are born again believers and we're disciples of Jesus, then we are part of that kingdom. And why would we waste time arguing and debating and fighting about this and that, when if it has nothing to do with God's kingdom, why get so caught up and tripped up in stuff like this? Like, sometimes I think it's nothing more than, just a distraction from the enemy. Like, really, and again, it's not like I have an issue with people who, have an opinion on women's rights. I'm a woman. I think it's right that women should be paid the same as men if they're doing the same job, or, should have equal rights to jobs. Like, if a woman wants to work, let her work. I don't have an issue with that. I think if there's respect and there is, respect in the workplace, and, they're being treated fair, well, what's your issue? Flip's sake, I think there's far more important things to be passionate about. And if you're a believer, that should be the kingdom. And I mainly think that because, government, people, anybody in this world, any human being, does not tell you your value as a person. They do not dictate your value as a person. And I find people who get hung up on stuff like that, on my rights, don't know their value and don't understand who they are. Now, again, if they're in the world, they wouldn't, because God created us, and so we get our value from what God says about us and who God has made us to be. We have value because He has value. He is the value. And so, because we're made in His image, and because Jesus died on the cross, obviously we were worth it to Him to do that. And so He determines what our value is. He determines our identity and who we are, which will far outlast this world. Our identity is not to be based in this world. It is to be based in His kingdom, which is an eternal kingdom. And so that is what we should be concerning ourselves about, is His kingdom. What are we doing for His kingdom? And sometimes I see, Christians protesting and holding up placards and, for this and that. I don't even want to name it, because somebody will get their panties in a bunch if I say, over this or whatever. And you never saw Jesus do that. You never saw Jesus holding up a placard saying, we have a right to this, we have a right to that, we have an opinion, we have a, No, Jesus came to serve, not to be served. He came to lay His life down as a ransom for many. He came to show us what it looks like to lay down your rights. If you are a believer, if you are a disciple of Jesus, you have died to yourself. You have died to the flesh. You have died to the things of this world. You have no rights. Even people who don't know God, who think they have rights, they don't really. Just because you're born doesn't mean you have a right to this and that. No, we have to work. We have to, because of Adam, we have to work to earn money, to feed ourselves, to have a home, to whatever. So we really have no rights. But especially believers, we've chosen to give up those rights. So when Christians get all crazy with their, "Oh, I believe this, this politics, this and that," and I think, what? See, if you put that much energy into advancing God's kingdom, which is a lasting, everlasting kingdom, man, maybe, I don't know, maybe we'd see more revival, if that's even the right term. But I just think, and it's not that I have an issue with people who have an opinion. We should have an opinion. We shouldn't be double-minded. Our opinion should be Bible-based. And when people ask us our opinion, we should, stand firm and say, this is what I believe, because it's the truth. And, if people persecute us, so be it. But we should always do things in love, and because that's what Jesus did. He did not get wrapped up in politics. He did not get wrapped up in his rights as a Jew and as a Jewish man. And he didn't come down saying, listen, guys, I'm the Son of God. I'm a rabbi. You should honor me more. You should listen to what I have to say. He never said that. He simply lived out his life as an example. And he represented the kingdom of God. And look at what his ministry was. Thousands of people healed. Thousands of people got saved. Were brought back to the Father because of the way he lived his life. And he didn't get caught up. In fact, the only time I can think that he really said anything about politics or government was when the Jews said, here, do you pay the temple tax? And because they were looking for a way to trap him. And he said, listen, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God's. If your government demands that you pay tax, then be honorable, be honest, and pay your tax. Don't cheat the government. Even if they're wrong, don't cheat them, because that's a bad reflection on you, and therefore it's a bad reflection on your Father. And he said, but give to God what is God's. So if God created us, our life is not our own. Paul talks about that. Jesus showed that, lived that out. Our life is not our own. We have given up our life for the sake of Christ. And we have died to the old man, to the old self, to all that fleshly stuff. And we are now made alive in Christ, which means his kingdom should be our number one ambition, our number one thing that we pursue. Seeing his kingdom come in our lives and around us in everything that we do. And so that's why we give to God what is God's. Ourselves, our lives, our hearts, our minds, our hands, our efforts, our time. We should be concerning ourselves with kingdom purpose, kingdom perspective, asking God, show us what your kingdom looks like, where I am today, with what I'm doing today. And to get wrapped up in this thing and that thing, yes, I think we should stand up for injustices, but not so much for ourselves, but for people who can't stand up for themselves, the likes of children and elderly people who, children obviously don't have the mind capacity to really stand up and say, no, this is unfair, and especially in cases of abuse. Yes, we stand up and we say, no, this shouldn't be done, and we want to change things so that children aren't being hurt, abused. Same with elderly people. Because God gave that to the church to look after the children and the elderly. And you can see that all through the Gospels, where the disciples had to look after the widows and people who couldn't look after themselves. So yes, that's good. That is a good cause. But it's still all within the kingdom perspective, all within God's kingdom. That is what we should be concerning ourselves about. Not wasting our time getting fired up about this and fired up about that, because you know what? It's all going to burn up by God's holy fire. Whatever is not of him, whatever is not done of him, will be burned up. The Bible's pretty clear about that. So don't get wrapped up in things like that. Don't concern yourself about things like that of the world. It's going to pass away. And Jesus says, be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. It's his kingdom. Blessings.